hip-hop and comics, cultures combining panel. I'm Patrick Reed, editor of Depth of Field magazine, and for as long as I can remember, I loved these two cultures and been amazed by all the different forms that they encompass. They're uniquely American. They're two forms with long and convoluted histories. I mean, anyone who knows anything about comics, which is presumably most of you, the history of comic books began before comics, or before comic books, with comic strips and big little books. The history of hip-hop begins with jazz and with soul and with disco and funk and graffiti, and some would say with rhythm itself. And both forms deal with combining elements, words and pictures, DJing and rapping and breakdancing and spray painting, and these are hybrid cultures, and they're cultures of inclusion. And today, in that spirit of inclusion, we bring together a group with experience in all sides of these forms. Each of them work from slightly different angles, but they all meet somewhere in the middle and have a certain kinship. So, all of my wordy introductions aside, let's meet the panelists. First, Tony Isabella, manager of Bulk Recordings and co-conspirator with the next panelist on projects like Deltron 3030 and the new Kilobyte album. Next is Dan the Automator, producer extraordinaire, known for his work with, oh boy, where do I begin? Handsome Boy Modeling School, Lovage, Deltron 3030, work under his own name. He's remixed and produced for The Eels and Primal Scream and countless other people. I could be spending the rest of the panel just listing his credits. So instead, he's done a lot of things, and they're all really good. So, Dan the Automator. Next in line, Charlie Tuna. I guess I don't need to continue introducing him. Known for his work with Jurassic 5, his solo work, and also a visual artist of some great renown. Next in line, Kenny Keel. Kenny started getting a lot of attention in hip-hop circles 3.5, 4 years ago when he did a series of superhero and classic album cover mashups. I discovered his work not from reading comic sources, but from reading OK Player and like various hip-hop blogs, and started seeing, oh, who is this guy? I need to talk to him about this. In the time since, he's worked on innumerable other projects, illustrated for Mad Magazine. He has a new series called Rhyme Travelers, which is an all-ages hip-hop focused comic. So, Kenny Keel. Next, James Ritano, head of TFU Studios. He has done work with Madlib and MF Doom and our next panelist in line, and Wu-Tang Clan. He has his own series called 1985, which is a ever so slightly fictionalized account of growing up in Central California on the coast, just as hip-hop is beginning to reach a serious national impact. It's fantastic. You should check it out. James Ritano. And the last panelist in line, Cutmaster Kurt. He runs Threshold Recordings. He has an endless resume for working with people such as Motion Man, Cool Keith, the Beastie Boys. He is a remixer and DJ and producer extraordinaire. Cutmaster Kurt. So, for the first sort of, the first question or topic, I'm just sort of going to throw up a loose ball and start. I guess I'll start with Kenny. Your first exposure to comics and with hip hop. How did you get exposed to these forms, and like what drew you to them?
Okay. both probably happened within the same 2 to 3 year window. First Superman comic, probably something I picked up at a grocery store before I could even read. I picked it up because it had this really dope looking ad for an Atari game. It's on a cover called Joust.
Yeah.
They were flying out of eggs. And that looked cool, so I just bought that. I couldn't really read yet. There was a crazy story where Superman's on the cover. He's about to fight these Vikings. But that story doesn't actually happen inside the comic. It was about like a Russian spy satellite or something. So, you know, it was over my head, and I think it was a little bit like that with hip hop too. With hip hop, it would have been after I started school, and I grew up in this really small town, so I didn't have really any older brothers or sisters or anybody to really put me onto this stuff. But I got put in this environment where, you know, you're 5 years old and you're eating lunch with the 6th graders at the same table because it was just so small. So I'm hearing them, you know, you're out there playing kickball and everybody's chanting "Mary, Mary, Run DMC," and I'm like, I gotta figure out how to work a radio when I get home because this sounds crazy. Like, so around that same time, I'm kind of just sort of discovering these two new worlds, and they've just kind of been intertwined in my mind ever since.
Charlie, same question. Comics and hip hop. Your exposure to them and what drew you to these things?
My exposure to comics was definitely because of my father. My father used to collect like Spider-Man and Superman and stuff like that. Eventually bleeding into like the Avengers and all those things. So I used to just kind of like pick up after him and grab his books, you know, go to the bathroom, read them. You know, I try to copy. I'm a painter first and foremost, so I learned how to do anatomy, I guess, through comics. You know, so I'm trying to copy different characters and stuff. I still love the comic Master of Kung Fu with Shang-Chi. So I used to, me and Shang-Chi was homies, man. That's how I learned how to draw with like muscles and stuff through him. So that's how I got into comics. Going shopping with my grandmother every Sunday. You know, she'd be like, if you go shopping with me, I'll buy your comic. So it was like that. But hip hop hit me the day Rapper's Delight came out. You know, that it was you were cool if you knew the 12-minute version of that song. So,
And you still are. Dan?
Well, first, how many people in this room are under 18 years of age? Oh, okay. No, I was just checking because you have this thing, be aware that many members of your audience may be under 18 and weren't supposed to say things. I see what I was supposed to say. I mean, primarily I'm a music person, but I grew up around a lot of comics and stuff. We used to go to comic book stores and the X-Men and well, primarily X-Men was where I would start getting into comics. But before that, there's a lot more comics for kids, and I gotta be honest, I read them all and don't really remember so much of that, but like the little, as a kid with the graphic novels was like the Asterix and the Tintin and all that kind of stuff, but like where it was actually comic books, I think it would start like around the time the X-Men were getting the Frank Miller years. It was, you know, pretty prevalent at that time. And I'm a fan of art in general, and now I realize I'm a big fan of art in general, so like seeing the drawings and seeing the graphics always really appealed to me and still do to this day. As far as music goes, I've been a big fan of music and records and all this stuff since I was a little kid, and ultimately to go back and look at it, I spent all my allowance on records and this kind of stuff, but like and for rap people, obviously Rapper's Delight, if you're that age, is a big moment in music. But for me, in addition to Rapper's Delight, there's a record called Do You Like Scratching? Malcolm McLaren, the world famous Supreme Team. And I kind of knew there was DJs and rappers and stuff, but then like there was such, the world famous Supreme Team is kind of a, I'll say crappy. I wouldn't say shitty, but like since there's people under 18, I would say crappy. Rap group, but it was like a radio show live on the air, kind of call-ins and stuff, and like, Cheryl, do you like the Supreme Team show? And do you like scratching? What is it? And then they're starting to run the records. I'm like, oh, I see what's going on, I get this, and it kind of started beyond that path of trying to like, I love the hip hop, which is a culture, but also just the idea of music and records and stuff really all kind of like solidified for me at that moment.
I'm going to address the same question to Kurt and James at the same time because, well, you share a lot of history.
Yes, we do.
So,
as far as like the first comic book, the one that comes to mind right now is the Muhammad Ali Superman. Superman. I don't remember what year that was. I was a little kid.
1977.
But I wish I still had it.
I do.
You got it? As far as hip hop goes, I would say like Soul Sonic Force. Some of it, like the electro stuff, was probably what I was into at the beginning. But I think once like Run DMC came out, just after that, that kind of resonated more with me. It was just a little bit more rough around the edges. And then when sampling started coming out, that was, I think, what got me interested in collecting records and trying to make my own beats and stuff like that. So, but I knew James back since '84, so
Wow.
we went to high school together, and it's cool that we're sitting here right now.
I think my first record that I got into for hip hop was Buffalo Gals. It was Malcolm McLaren who had produced the Sex Pistols, and he, for some strange reason, moved to New York and got in touch with Bambaataa and did this, just like this world beat record. It was really odd, but I remember getting that for Christmas one year because it had like break dancers on it and everything else, and I remember just thinking, this is just amazing. And I just kind of got obsessed. And then with comics, I started when I was 5. I bought a Ghost Rider comic, and ever since then, I've just kind of been obsessed. And I think that kind of led itself to graffiti, because graffiti kind of looked like the words on the comics, and the names and everything, so that kind of just made sense to me. And then I got into that as in my adolescence, and yeah, ever since. But I'm still obsessed with that Buffalo Gals record. When you were talking about it, Dan, I just thought, oh yeah, I still love that record.
So this is specifically here on the West Coast in the 80s. I have a firm memory of hip hop seeming like this sort of enthralling alien culture. And James, you talked about this in 1985. You sort of touched on the sensation of being drawn to something strange and mysterious. How did you actually end up making this part of your career? Like, what made this not just another strange record that you picked up, but something that now, working in comics, you're still using as a touchstone?
Well, I got into animation just by chance. I just kind of picked it up like in the 90s. I started doing it, and then Kurt hired me to do one of his music videos, and that just kind of led to, it was kind of just like it just really took off. I did a video for him and Cool Keith in 1999, and I had worked at a skateboard company and done skateboard graphics, but then I got into animation, and then Biz Marquis calls me, like seriously, a month after I'd done this video, and said, hey, I want a video too, and that just happened. It was like, oh, wow, okay, I guess I'm really gonna do this. And, ever since then, it's kind of just one thing's led to another, and I mean, I call it a career, but I just feel like I've gotten away with it for so long. I'm waiting for another shoe to drop and just saying, oh, you're not doing this anymore. You're gonna go back to working in a kitchen or something, but. So yeah, I guess it's a career, but yeah, it's been awesome, and I get to work with her.
So Dan, there's clear comic book influences on graffiti and b-boy styles, and there's an easy literal connection to make with lyricism and rapping. But how did the sensibility and the imagery and the sort of subtext of comics, how do these influence the worlds of DJ and production, and how do they, specifically your work, like how do you incorporate those things in a sort of less immediately recognizable way for a listener?
Well, for me, I think like movies or anything, TV shows or whatever, records, everything has an arc. It starts somewhere, it, you know, emotionally takes you somewhere, and it comes back if it's good. And if it's, well, anyway, so there's an arc in a TV show or a movie or whatever, much as there's an arc in a song or a record. The thing is that like when you make music, you don't have the visual component. I mean, you have videos and whatnot, but the actual music itself doesn't have visual component. So for me, it's thinking about the visual component in terms of what's going on in the record emotionally, or maybe literally if it's a story, but thinking about that and trying to present it as if it's the score to some comic or some movie that you haven't seen. And in that way, the influences of reading comics or watching movies or whatever, and how you feel when you see it, or like you feel the Dark Note when, like, I don't know, Jaws happens or something, you feel that. And then you for me, it's like I try to reinterpret it and throw it out there based on what emotional stuff I'm pulling from, which includes a lot of pop art, pop culture, and everything else like that. But specifically, as opposed to like a novel or opposed to a movie, a comic, you can generally bring it down to a more manageable size where you can get a story or a vignette, I guess is what I would say, and that's, I think, the relationship for me at least.
Okay. Kurt, as the other producer and music man on the panel, do you have any thoughts on that? How, I mean, aside from, you know, having James provide artwork for you certainly provides a comic element right off the bat, but for your, in your instrumental works in particular, like in producing for people, what influences comics and that sort of visual culture have on you, if any?
Well, I think, like, from the hip-hop standpoint, I was always a fan of graffiti, although I was never very good at it. And like, James being my friend, he used to do pieces. I used to put them up in my room, my studio, and I was always, there's also a lot of elements from comics into graffiti as well. So there's that relationship into hip-hop, and I think just being around hip-hop, growing up, you get these images in your mind, and you might just come up with something that's subliminal in your mind. You don't know where it's coming from all the time. Like, I don't always think stuff out. For instance, with the Masters of Illusion project, I didn't even know what I was going to do for a video, but I saw James was working, you know, a day job, and he was doing some little animations. I said, hey, what do you think about creating a whole, like, music video for this? And he was like, well, I don't know. It could be done. Let's try to do some little pieces and see what comes up. So I wouldn't say like the comics had a direct influence when I made the record, but being that I was a fan of comics and I was able to kind of see how it could all fit together really well for that project and do something kind of unique and fun.
So, Tony, as someone who runs a record label and handles a lot of the business aspects of these things, possibly you have a whole, at least an additional perspective on this. What are your thoughts on the appeal of mixing these forms? There's obviously some crossover built in, as this panel demonstrates. But for something like the upcoming Joeltron record, the Pillow Fight project, how do you deal with taking these things that appeal to both sides of this potential market, and then, you know, draw them in and let them know, hey, there's this thing you'll really like?
Well, it's, you know, my job for many years I've worked with Dan for many years, and one of the things I need to do is try and find ways to help bring his vision to fruition. And if you're familiar with any of his personal projects, all the way back to Dr. Octagon, he has always used character-driven art. Very rarely does he appear in the art, but when he does, it's as a character. And when he doesn't, we use various illustrators or, you know, graffiti artists, whatever, over the years. And the first project I probably had to figure out was Dr. Octagon. And I was friendly with an artist who's become very famous named Pusshead. You may or may not know who he is. And it was basically trying to bring, Dan had a specific vision for that record, and so I kind of learned with him how to bring all the information to the visual artist, get them the information they need so they, when they bring the product, it's close to, you know, hopefully close to the vision Dan had been looking for. And then, you know, basically, as time went on, it's become, you know, he oftentimes knows what artist he wants to work with, but it's, you know, sometimes helping him find the person, and again, how to impart Dan's ideas and his vision to the artist so they both, you know, come up with an ending that, you know, they're both happy with. So, but what the newest record we have out, Pillow Fight, we worked with David Cho, and that was kind of a different scenario because we're working with him in more of a partnership. I would say that if you, as a label, wanted to go out and hire David Cho today to do an album cover, it's probably not affordable, especially on the indie level. So he agreed because he's friends with Dan, was passionate about the music, that he decided we could partner on this. So basically he, you know, has provided all the visuals for the record, and he works with us on merchandising and basically the look and feel of the whole thing. So instead of having some in-house graphic designer, because we agreed to partner with him, we have, you know, a great, fantastic high-end artist who, you know, helps us out with all the visuals. So that seems to be how what the future's holding for our projects is finding a particular artist with a particular look and feel who's going to partner with us.
And matching the visual identity to the musical.
Exactly.
Cool. Identities are a thing that come up a lot in these panels. A thing that I've heard a lot in the past is that comics provided inspiration for an alternate persona for people's professional lives. And how does that affect what you do? Like, is Charlie Tuna a substantially different person? Is Dan McNamara a different character than Dan the Automator? I guess is Kurt Metlin the businessman and Cut Master Kurt the DJ of Ultimate Destruction? Like, how does taking on that persona affect your work?
You know what's the trick? My name comes from my father. I got my name when I was like 5 years old, from being Charles Jr. and him not wanting to call me Little Pee Wee because that was his nickname when he was a kid. So he started calling me Tuna from the Starkist commercials. And I didn't think that, you know, it was a childhood name. I was just like, man, I was trying to run from it for years. Like, honestly, trying to run from it. But when I embraced the whole hip hop thing, you know, so actually trying to rap, I was looking for moniker. And you draw back to your comic book, you know what I'm saying, background. And thought, okay, so how would a superhero do it? You know, and would this moniker, like, you know, encompass who I am and what I do, you know what I'm saying? So to answer your question, Charlie Tuna is the same dude as Charles Stewart, to be perfectly honest. But you know what I'm saying, on record, people might not get a chance to know me personally, so they gravitate to this big robotic deep voice dude from the Jurassic 5, you know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? And so in using that, I just kind of like, I'm able to not necessarily hide behind it, but I'm able to kind of propel through the world with music. So,
Well, I mean, also like a team up for the ages, Dan the Automator and Charlie Tuna.
you know what I'm saying? It sounds like a comic book going.
Excellent. Dan, do you have any thoughts on that, or like the difference in identity between like taking on that sort of persona?
Well,
You can say no. I mean,
no.
I actually don't. Everything I do is exactly not the same, but like I can come from the same place. But that being said, music is one component of people's emotional reaction to stuff. I mean, what I mean by that, like, you know, sense of smell, taste, hearing, like those kind of things are like what we have in music. hear, that sensation exists already. I mean, it exists when you hear it. So all the other ancillary stuff that goes along with it kind of helps create a bigger picture, you know. And when you see like what you're saying, like Charlie Tuna, which is his childhood nickname, at least it becomes a bigger thing. It's like it's more iconic in that respect, and I think that's the personas and the names and just even I don't think NWA was out like, you know, gang banging on the weekends, you know. But the persona just makes it more interesting and more something that as an audience or a listener you might get more, you get more out of it. You follow it.
Cut, do you, or Kurt, or Cut Master?
Yeah.
Thoughts on your alternate persona of...
Well, I don't know, for some reason I came up with the funky redneck. I think part of it had to do with actually having a bit of a redneck. It's just a continually sunburned neck and kind of taking the piss out of myself with that.
Well, tell them about Kurt Cobain.
Kurt Cobain?
Wasn't that your first nickname?
That was one from the Dr. Octagon project that Menelik was calling me, I think. But yeah, that didn't stick really. But anyway, I got some stickers up here. This is me. James drew this. This is my funky redneck character. So if you guys want to come up and grab it, it's me on the tractor. So I kind of had fun with that. Kind of, I guess, the wrestling mask part of it was kind of a funny story. I was doing a lot of DJ work with Cool Keith at the time, and he was just starting to wear the Black Elvis wig. He always wore capes and different stuff, but he was like telling me, man, you need an image. You need to like dye your hair blonde or get a tattoo on your face. Or, you know, this is before Tyson obviously had one. And I was like, yeah, okay. But I wasn't gonna do that, but I found this wrestling mask, and one day I was knocking at his door with it on. And I could tell he was looking through the hole, but he wouldn't answer the door. I was like, it's me, it's Kurt. He's like, oh, okay, go, that's dope. He's like, I like that. So that's how I came up with that image. And later on, I noticed a lot of people were doing that, and I ended up getting a beard. And the story was that I developed around that, which was the funky redneck thing more so. And that was basically just that I wear a prosthetic beard, kind of like if somebody had an accident and they lost an arm or something like that. So that's why you can see the strap on it. It's like I wasn't trying to make it look too real, but that's kind of like just having fun with, I think, making fun of myself really. And then in the musical aspect, you know, I had an album called The Redneck Olympics with like pictures with me riding tractors and wrestling with pigs in the mud, milking cows, and you know, that kind of stuff.
All right, Kenny, let's talk about your experience with hip hop. The first major recognition that you got, as I said, was those superhero and hip hop mashups some years ago. And since then, hip hop has kept being a thread in a lot of your work in Rhyme Travelers and Ferrari Boys. What is it that keeps drawing you back to like pulling these elements together?
Well, the way it started, I was home, I was trying to draw like a picture of Thor, just like a straightforward pinup style of Thor, and it was just not coming together. And I was getting kind of frustrated. I think iTunes Shuffle was on. Straight Outta Compton comes on. I'm drawing and I'm like, straight out of Asgard. You know? So it goes from me in the pinup to he's got the hammer and Balder and you know the whole crew standing around him. And I was like, it was just crazy. I was like,
do you have a copy of that with you?
Yeah, sure,
Pulled up as a visual reference, just so anybody who does not know can like.
So, and it was just like, yeah. That was my reaction when I drew it. I was like, and I didn't plan on it but I couldn't turn my mind off of that frequency after that. So, you know, in like the span of like a week, you know, yeah, like, yeah. Oh, okay. I'm trying to remember, like, so I did like Modoc, Giant Head, with Nas, Illmatic, Modoc.
Yes. Charlie Tuna is your hype man right now. Just pointing that out.
Yeah. So I'm doing these, and I'm like, okay, like me and 12 other people are gonna get this, but what the hell, I had a lot of fun. So, you know, I throw them up online. That was my purpose in the first place, to just put some illustrations out there. And it was just nuts. It was kind of like putting this bat signal out for people whose worlds and passions crossed over from hip hop to comics. And I couldn't have been more surprised with how it got picked up. I was even surprised that it was a lot of the music blogs jumped on it first, and then the comic blogs, and then more blogs saw that. And it was just kind of doing the, I guess, the viral thing, you know, and getting around there. And it just, to me, it was like, oh, so I can do that. So there are people who will respond to that. And so, yeah, from then on out, I've been like, you know, I had this book out last year at WonderCon, and I met Gustavo, shout out, and we collaborated on Rhyme Travelers. And, you know, people would see this book and they would just be like, if they didn't get it, they were just kind of confused and angry at me or something. Or like, but if they got it, they really got it, and it would pull them in. So, yeah, so we started collaborating on this, Rhyme Travelers, and it's sort of like an all-ages sci-fi adventure about this hip-hop group that kind of tours throughout space and ends up having to save the galaxy kind of by accident. And it's just full of references to the music. You know, they've got like ads for their albums. Yeah, I went back to the well on, you know, NWA, and there's like album reviews and, you know, just nonstop, just barrage of references to, you know, all that stuff I love. And yeah, I guess it got really goofy. I was really just sleep deprived when I did Ferrari Boys, which is, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Gucci Mane and Wonka So yeah, I was just like listening to them, and they put out a collaboration called Ferrari Boys, and we're talking about these personas, and they have these crazy personas, and you know, I thought this is awesome. So what I kind of did was I just attributed even crazier personas to them. And I kind of put them in like, what if Gucci Mane and Waka Flocka Flame were in like a low-budget Saturday morning cartoon? And they were like super spies who had to save the world. And so, yeah, I put that up online, and yeah, those are kind of the things I got going on now. And it's really kind of all thanks to those first mashups I was just doing, you know, in my bedroom for fun. Yep.
So, Dan and Charlie, I overheard you earlier talking about your experience with comics and how a lot of what drew you to the old or Marvel comics in particular was the sort of sense of history. And that's also something that, you know, I hear complained a lot about hip-hop these days, is a lack of sense of history. We keep on going and burying the old stories and coming up with something new. At what point did the hip-hop and comics thing, when did you ever first put those things together in your minds? Like, was there a moment of, you know, from like 82, you have Spider-Man cracking a joke about those crazy breakdancers, and then all of a sudden, you know, 9 years later, in 89 or 90, two plays suddenly have their own Marvel comic. Like, you can trace the history of hip-hop as it crept into the mainstream by using comics as the spectrum to do that. And at what point did like those things sort of make sense in your mind? You keep making all of your projects, or a majority of your projects, seem to have awesome like science fiction comic connotations, and you're working in a visual spectrum as well. Like, how did these things, like, what draws these together? Why would you come to a panel like this? Sorry, that's sort of a roundabout question, but
why? For me, it's like I think
He wanted the Thor.
Yeah. Action figure. Extremely. I'm a Thor fan, and I had to get it. I'm sorry. Okay, but now I think the connection. Well, first and foremost for me, just the colorful comics, man. Just graffiti and comics just connect so well together. They basically are mirror images of each other. I mean, from watching the Batman and the whole little on the feet thing going on with the band pal. I mean, that's graffiti. So I think it always kind of it always sat together in my mind. I was like he said, 1977. I went and bought this big old comic book where I saw Superman get his ass beat by same year my sister was born, same year Star Wars came out. It was just all these things that they all like happened together. You know what I mean? So it all sat in my head in the same way. You know what I mean? I think the fact that comics, as well as hip hop, up until a certain point, included current events. You know what I mean? Whatever was happening, and it was even still to this day with the comics. It's like it's cool to see current events seep into the storyline. But I just think, like what me and Dan were talking about earlier, was that you spend, especially with comics, you spend so many years laying down these rich, thick, very meaningful storylines that all you have to do is just duplicate them, just bring them to life on the movie screen the exact way that they're laid down. But it seems as though you're trying to cram it all into one big box and sell it to like a certain age group as opposed to all these people who have been following this forever. You know what I'm saying? So I think even with hip hop, but I think even with hip hop, it's like the kids. It's designed now strictly for a certain age group. I'm not sure if it was like that when we were coming up. Maybe it was, but I think definitely now more than ever, it's like my analogy is it's like a piece of gum. You get the gum, you take the wrapper off. You chew the gum till the flavor's gone. Then you go grab another piece of gum. It's the same thing, you know what I'm saying? So it's like the historical aspect of it has disappeared. The meaningful aspect of it has disappeared. Even in a lot of gangster rap, it was to reflect what was actually going on in that area, that things that people didn't see on CNN or on the news. You know what I'm saying? You couldn't say that NWA was Crips, Bloods, or whatever. They were black. They were, in my opinion, the inner city public enemy, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? So it's just one of those things where it's like at that particular time, and in its height with hip hop as well as with comics, history basically reflects through it, and I think it all sits together in your mind, especially if you dive into both cultures.
Anything else?
Well, only thing I would say I would add to that is just to pick up where Charlie left off with groups like Public Enemy or groups like NWA, they are larger than life. It kind of is that comic thing, stories told from a broader brushstroke, I would say. And to that end, I think hip hop, comics, and like heavy metal as well. A lot of these things they're not anti-society, but they're not up the middle in that way. So if you come from that state of mind, I think a lot of these things you can gravitate towards a lot of stuff where like comics, much like a Public Enemy or an NWA, they can make a moral statement or a statement of sorts that is done in a different way. It's not done the same way you might get it from, I don't know, school or something. And it's artistic. And so all these things, there's all these common parallels, I feel like. So if it works for you on one level, it might work for you on some level. Like in heavy metal, the same thing, or black metal, like really like, especially when you go to like the darker European, like it's imagery, a lot of it's imagery. And I think while all individually don't necessarily relate, I think they all relate on a grander scale.
Heading down there to James, 1985, your series, it's a series about kids in a California beach town, we'll call it Santa Cruz, in the 80s, just as hip-hop's really beginning to have that national impact. And how much of that is autobiographical and how much of it is fictionalized?
It's about 60-40.
Okay.
So 60% nonfiction, about 40%. I mean, just...
So you're sitting next to 40% of a fictional character.
This guy right here, he does not exist.
No, it's an amalgam of whatever it is of memories, but you're trying to stitch stuff together just to make it somewhat interesting for someone who wasn't there. So I just did not want this to be a you had to be there kind of comic. I really wanted this to be something that was, I don't know, that was a shared experience of being in this small little town and finding out about hip hop, which was landed like a Martian spaceship in Santa Cruz, and we just all got into it. And, you know, there were so many. There were just so many things with comics, especially. I mean, I collected comics as a little kid, and I remember buying hip hop records was like the same thing. It was like this completist attitude of like, oh, I'm gonna go dig in these crates in this basement for old jazz records, whereas a couple of years earlier I was digging in boxes of old comics. It was the same kind of a thing, and it kind of carried over to hip hop. So, but with the comic, I mean, it's yeah, it's somewhat fictional, but you know, a lot of it really happened.
Yeah. To clarify my comment for anyone who hasn't read it, that Kurt down there is actually the person who's featured in the series in the high school days of.
I met Kurt. When I met Kurt, he said, yeah, we'll go to this record store called Star Records in San Jose. They have all the newest electro and hip hop and all that kind of stuff. And he says, yeah, I get 2 copies of everything. And I said, why do you get 2 copies of everything? Your response was, are you serious? He was like, he was in the know. He had his own radio show at 15. So, yeah.
Sounds like something I would have said.
So, when, this is sort of just throwing this up as a loose ball. When you attend a convention like this, walking in with this sort of like hip hop and comics thing, what do you take away from it? Like, you're sitting here on this panel, what sort of, are you taking away ideas, inspirations, concepts? There's clearly this audience that's interested in both these things. And like, Charlie, as someone who is, you know, who probably best encompasses the width and breadth of this as a musician and visual artist, like, what are you walking away from this room thinking?
You know what, I walked in, when they told me, when they asked me to do this, I was like, yeah, we're gonna be on the panel? And they told me it was gonna be, my biggest thing was like, oh, I can't wait to hear what they have to say about comics and about hip hop. I mean, I kind of know, I work with this man on several projects, and you know, I know where, you know, to an extent, where he sits when it comes to the music, but I was just really, really intrigued about his comic book knowledge, you know? It's like a secret society. I don't know if y'all know. We all comic bases, y'all. I'm just trying to tell you. And it's dope to me to be able to run into somebody who I don't know, and all of a sudden something triggers the love for like Wolverine or something. Also, we start talking about it like in a depth that like the regular person couldn't talk to me like that. That's amazing. You know what I'm saying? So I wanted to take away from this just the, you know, little things that I can learn personally about each person. You know what I'm saying, from a comic book perspective. And also like, this whole thing is just inspiring as it is, man. You know, period. Just for me to even be here, I'm tripping, because like I said, my grandma used to buy me a comic as a treat. Like, baby, you gonna come shopping with me? Okay, cool, I'll buy you a comic book. And now I'm sitting on the panel, so it's all.
And Tony, as the de facto business person on this panel,
Yes.
Are you like, what is this making you think? Like, not just dealing with the usual hip hop crowd of folk, but like looking at the people who are really interested in that sort of visual identity and aspect of it.
What is always good for me to come to these is I'll wander off by myself and, you know, go to a different panel, or it just gets me thinking of different ways to collaborate. Which, you know, I was in the Buffy writers panel, and I'm like, hey, I could give them some music, and maybe we could. It just is always, when you're in a creative environment like this, my wheels are always turning about different collaborations we could come up with, or partnerships we could form. So, you know, it's always good for me to be out and see what's happening.
Cool. We are getting close to the end. So to make sure that I fit this in, let's start down with Kurt and talk about the stuff that you have new and upcoming. Like, what projects are you working on that this room needs to know about? Like,
real quick, I just wanted to say, like, I was collecting comics. I have like 3 long boxes. They're still in my closet, my old room. And but like, and walking around today, I was seeing some of the old comics that I had, like the Wolverine miniseries and stuff like that. And I was thinking, damn, I gotta go back and read some of these. So that was a cool thing about being here today. I think like when I got into music and DJing, it was just too much for me to collect two things. But today I was kind of thinking, oh, I should pick up a couple of things. But I think the collector's mind state is similar probably between comic book collectors and music or record collectors as well. Maybe some of you do both, but it was too much for me. But anyway, just to finish up, I guess I've been doing some archival releases. I think like there's interest in unreleased music that artists have done that hasn't seen the light of day. So I think one of the first ones I did that was pretty well received was just like demos from the Sextile album that me and Cool Keith did, stuff that wasn't released. So we put that out in like 2007, I think, something like that. Me and Motion Man put out music that was recorded 92, 93 era recently. It's called Uneven Pavement. It's like an EP with the material. And recently I dropped just a limited edition, but of course it's not limited on iTunes or whatever, but that would be interesting though, if they did that. But yeah, so it's like unused instrumentals that I did like in the 90s. And, it was funny, I had some people, you didn't really make that in the 90s, come on man. This is new stuff. This is more recent than that, but it's like early 90s beats, that's what it's called.
And this is all through Threshold Recordings?
Yeah, it's through my label, yeah.
Or what's the...
Yeah, through Threshold Recordings. My website's www.threshrex.com. I got stickers up here, take a bunch, give them to your friends or whatever.
Awesome.
And yeah, so I got some new things coming, and just keep your ears, your eyes out.
All right, James, up next, 1985, Volume 5?
1985, Volume 5 should be out summer. So, yeah.
Excellent. And Kenny?
All right, let's see. Rhyme Travelers #1 just dropped for WonderCon, so I better get started too. And let's see. Yeah, Long Box weighs a ton. This is the mashups. You know, it's still for fun. Just you know, so I put those up on talestosuffice.com is my website. Those go up there. Rory Boys, New Adventure.
Charlie?
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm putting together, I have a project that I'm trying to do simply because I've noticed that the way that people consume music nowadays is not necessarily the way we used to do it. Like Kurt used to say, we used to go down and dig in boxes and get records. Nowadays, it's like on iTunes and Amazon and all that, and you know, you might thumb through 5 songs and then the rest of the songs you don't like, and you get those 5 songs. So I figured I'll do a series of EPs. These EPs are called Against the Current, and they are loosely inspired by music that my father basically introduced me to as a kid, from Caribbean music, all styles, like salsa, reggae, cumbias, all those things, to like live rock, jazz, things of that nature, to like house. I'm from Chicago, so the birthplace of house music and all the electronic stuff. Therefore, I attribute to just that birth of house. So. And then hip hop. So what I'm doing is just putting each one out, 5 songs, and they basically reflect the music that inspired me through my father. But the end result of all of these things, they're going to stretch out throughout the year. The end result is for me to be able to put out a coffee table book full of my paintings and art and photos and things of that nature at the end of the whole series. So if you want to check it out, pledgemusic.com/CharlieTuna, or you just go to charlietuna.com, CHALI2NA. And last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if y'all know, but Jurassic 5 is back together, so we're going to do some cool shit. You know, what's that responsible about my other stuff?
Okay, and Dan and Tony, what do you have up right now, and what's on the way?
Well, I want to hear Charlie's house record, actually.
So what would you help me make it?
Yeah, I help you, man. Get that Marshall Jefferson kind of vibe going.
I'm saying.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. I'll be all Farley. I'll go Farley on that for you, man. Got a new label situation this year at EMI, Bulk Recordings. We have our first release, Pillow Fight, with David Cho as a third partner in that group. We have some pretty good videos, and if you're under 18, you should not be watching them. All four of you. Then in June, well, also I got the Jamie Cullum album coming out. The single just came out. That's Universal, I guess. And got in June, next release is going to be Deltron: The Return 3030 Part 2. Records in the can. I'm really pretty happy with that thing. If you like what it is, I think you might like it. And then this fall, I got another record coming out also called Got a Girl. It's I'm only mentioning it because since we're at a comic thing, the girl in this is Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Ramona Flowers, and blah blah blah. And I know a few other records coming in studio this week with some people. I guess you'll see it when you see it.
So as Dan said, the Deltron project's going to start to roll out this summer, and the one thing I do want to say is I encourage you, if you see a show coming to your town, you should try and check it out, because it's the first time. For years, Dan's wanted to work with a full orchestra in a live environment, and last year we started on that. A group of Canadian festivals got together and brought the new Deltron to Canada for some festivals, and they underwrote our trip and allowed us to actually put together an orchestra. So when you see Deltron, hopefully it will be with an orchestra, and the show is fantastic. So I recommend it. And I'm sure you all know who Ramona Flowers is, but Mary Elizabeth was co-starred in the Scott Pilgrim movie with Michael Cera, and Dan met her while he was doing music for the movie in Toronto, and that's how they formed a musical relationship. So, and that project's called Got a Girl. Okay.
Awesome. We are out of time. We'll be doing more of these panels over the next few months at other conventions. Come see us in DC in April, and at Awesome Con and at other places. Thanks so much to my partner in Depth of Field, Marty Joyce, to all the people who are part of this discussion who couldn't be here, who supported it in the past, to the awesome WonderCon staff for all their work in putting this thing together, and to all the panelists, to the audience.